On this episode of Ergo, with friends like Republicans, who needs enemies? Because that's what recusal is to say that I'm voluntarily surrendering my authority to oversee these investigations. I believe that we are certainly making ground on the case that may, in my mind and in my hopes and in my prayers, will take down Donald Trump. And that is, the Republican Party has and is waging the second Civil War. With that said, I am taking the gloves off. I am done playing nice. I am done being tolerant of those who don't value me and all minorities as people. Welcome back to Ergo, everybody. I'm your host, Brandon, here in Ohio. Happy to be here with you this Sunday to talk politics. First and foremost, we have Dean Heller, the Republican Senator of Nevada. Dean Heller is supposed to be a moderate Republican, which means he's supposed to be more middle-minded and less conservative than most of his Republican colleagues. And Nevada is also a purple state, which means that it has equal amounts of Democrat voters, equal amounts of Republican voters, and equal amount of independent voters. So it was understandable that when the Republicans came out with the litany of bills that they came out with to repeal and replace Obamacare, he was one of the first Republican senators to come out publicly and verbalize through statements that he was in opposition of all repeal and replace efforts, essentially saying that he would vote no on any effort to repeal and replace Obamacare. And again, that is understandable because when you are representing a state that has equal amount of Republican, Democrat, and independent voters, you need support of your Republican base if you're a Republican. Plus, you're going to need some votes from the Democrats and the independents, and vice versa if you were a Democrat running. So, when the bill, the skinny repeal bill, came to the floor for a vote, everyone was expecting Republican Senator Dean Heller to vote no on the skinny repeal bill. However, he voted yes. He voted for repeal and replacing Obamacare, despite his several statements saying that he was in opposition of it, saying that he would vote no on it. So, since he did that, that's a potentially career-ending move, because there are a lot of Democrats that are on Obamacare. There are a lot of independents that are on Obamacare. And surprisingly, believe it or not, there are many Republicans that are also on Obamacare. So when you vote to repeal with no replacement, which is what the skinny repeal bill was, when you vote to do that, if it were to become law, you would have essentially snatched away insurance from several million people. That is why it is a potentially career-ending move for him. Despite the fact that he completely destroyed any credibility and any integrity that he had by coming out in public saying that he would vote no and that he was in opposition of it, to only get behind closed doors on the Senate floor and vote yes. And their voting records are a matter of public record anyway. So what was the point of coming out and saying that you'd vote no when really you were intending to vote yes? Slate.com reports it this way. Quote, "The skinny repeal bill, of course, failed. So now Heller is on the record having voted for a damaging bill backed by an unpopular person, Donald Trump, which will hurt him with independent voters and whatever Democrats were considering crossing the aisle for him." End quote. So, for someone to be in Dean Heller's position, which is a difficult one, he is from a purple state, equal Democrat voters, equal Republican voters, equal independent voters. Being from a purple state, supposing to be middle-minded, supposing to be moderate Republican, you voted yes on this. You just probably destroyed your re-election chances. So anyone with a functioning brain cell should be and probably are asking, why would he make such a dumb decision? I'm glad that many people are thinking the way that I'm thinking, because Slate.com reports also, quote, fresh off Senator Dean Heller's vote for the so-called skinny Obamacare repeal, a super PAC linked to Senate Majority Leader Mitch McConnell says it will spend 7 figures to defend him, including fending off any primary challenge. So what that quote is saying is that the Republican Senate Majority Leader Mitch McConnell bought Dean Heller's vote with a simple $1 million in campaign re-election funding and a promise that there would be no other Republican in Nevada to give him a primary challenge for his re-election. So it is good to know, Republican Senator Dean Heller, that the millions of people that would have lost their insurance is not as important as your re-election. And it is also good to note that you're willing to sell your soul for a measly $1 million that you won't even personally get to spend.
Well, I do think that we've seen more people ready to stand up, and I wish that we as a party would have stood up. For example, when the birtherism thing was going along, a lot of people did stand up, but not enough.
Did you do enough?
That was particularly ugly.
I'm just curious. Do you?
On that, I think I did.
Yeah.
But on other things as well. I mean, when our party, I wonder, during rallies when the chants lock her up. We shouldn't be the party for jailing your political opponents. And anybody at that rally, anybody at those rallies ought to stand up and say, that's inappropriate. We shouldn't be doing that. And I wish we as a party and elected officials would do more of that. Or when particularly ugly conspiracy theories go out, or simply fake news, stuff that is just demonstrably false, we ought to stand up and say, hey, that's just not right.
That was Republican Senator Jeff Flake of Arizona. He was on Meet the Press with Chuck Todd. This Republican senator has made national news a lot lately for his new book and all of his public attacks on Donald Trump and all of his attacks against his own party, the Republican Party. He states his issues with the Republican Party is the fact that they've betrayed their conservative values, that they've sold their soul to Donald Trump just for the sake of winning the White House, and that they're not doing enough to stand up for them being an equal branch of government in Congress, and that they're not doing enough to stand up to Donald Trump. His problem with Donald Trump extends back many years, and it is a long list of problems that he has with Donald Trump. His first issue is the fact that Donald Trump proposed that whole birther theory about former President Barack Obama, and stating that President Barack Obama was not born in the United States, that he was born somewhere else, and therefore he was not a legitimate president. He also has an issue with the fact that Donald Trump demeans, demoralizes, and denigrates Mexicans, Muslims, and pretty much every other minority. He also has a problem with the fact that Donald Trump's base is pretty much just a massive gang of extreme alt-right, white extremist terrorists. So people who have a problem with any of that is certainly someone I would call respectable, right? Like, of course, you would respect anyone who has a problem with Donald Trump and most of the Republicans in Congress right now. But the operative word is would have a problem, because I would have a problem if that were his true stance. Here is a picture of Republican Senator Jeff Flake and his son, Tanner Flake. Tanner Flake is a teenager, and in 2013, he made national news. He made national news for bigotry, racism, anti-Semitism, and homophobia. It was noted that in an online game he frequently played, his name on that game was Nigger Killer. And on YouTube, he frequently used the word nigger, as well as calling Mexicans the scum of the earth. It was also noted that on Twitter, his word of choice for pretty much everything was the word faggot, as he used it frequently. And anyone that stole something from him, even as small as a joke, was called a Jew on his Twitter account, because that's what he called one of his friends that stole a joke from him on Twitter. He called him a Jew. So my whole point with those two Republican senators is to paint this picture for you and to give you this message. Don't be fooled by any of these Republican senators that are on the TV, that are writing the articles, that are on these podcasts and radio shows trying to visualize themselves or give themselves the image of being a profile in courage. Because as you can see in private, Tanner Flake is learning this bigotry, homophobia, anti-Semitism, and racism from somewhere. And I'm very highly suspicious that that somewhere is from his own father, Republican Senator Jeff Flake. Anyways, after the break, we're going to talk 2020 presidential elections and how Republicans are planning to run against Republicans. Ergo wants to be the platform for you to discuss your political thoughts. Please feel free to join the discussion via phone, video, or in person. To set up an interview, contact the Ergo Show at Outlook.com. So, as most of you know, Donald Trump is a registered Republican. He is in his first term of occupying the White House, and he's up for re-election in 2020. Now, in presidential elections, if there is a president of one party, people of that same party typically do not challenge him or run against him or her, so to speak. So, for example, when Barack Obama was up for re-election in 2012, there were no other Democrats running, because that has always been the precedent. It establishes a sense of loyalty, a sense of trust and camaraderie within the party. And it will also be very stupid and futile if people did run against their own party people. However, the year 2020 may set some new standards. The New York Times reports the following. Quote, Senators Tom Cotton and Ben Sasse have already been to Iowa this year. Governor John Kasich is eyeing a return to visit New Hampshire. And Mike Pence's schedule is so full of political events that Republicans joke that he is acting more like a second-term vice president, hoping to clear the field than a number two sworn in a little over 6 months ago. End quote. Republican Senator Tom Cotton from Arkansas is planning a 2-day fundraiser in New York, and he will charge $5,000 per person. So I'm sure he'll make a pretty presidential bankroll off of that. Republican Senator Ben Sasse from Nebraska has been very quietly and very secretively meeting with a lot of Republican political donors, and he's been advertising himself as this independent conservative that's able to separate himself and think independently. He's also been talking of ways to promote his agenda on a national level. Governor John Kasich of Ohio, who I would personally like to see as a president one day just because of his attitude and the things that I've seen him do and say. There you go. Shocking. Just for off the script moment for people who say that I never support Republicans. I just said I will support John Kasich being the president. At any rate, he ran against Donald Trump in 2016, and he lost the primary to Donald Trump, unfortunately. However, now he's refusing to deny or decline that he may challenge Donald Trump in 2020. And then last but not least is that snake Mike Pence, who's supposed to be Donald Trump's number two because he is the vice president. He's been doing the most out of all of the people in terms of showing signs of someone that is going to run in 2020. He's established his own independent power base, his own political fundraising PAC that has made substantially way more money than Donald Trump's re-election PAC has done. He's also been advertising and marketing himself as the go-to person between the Republican National Committee and the White House. He's kind of trying to be the middleman. He's promoting himself with the Republican National Committee, the established Republican National Committee. So all of these moves made by these current Republican government officials can basically be summed up into this. The New York Times reports, quote, "The would-be candidates are cultivating some of the party's most prominent donors, courting conservative interest groups, and carefully enhancing their profiles," end quote. That is to say again, they are covertly and not so subtly setting the stage for what I think is going to be a 2020 presidential primary challenge within the Republican Party. And if it happens, it's going to be good, and I hope to see it.
Being offended doesn't work anymore. Throwing insults doesn't work anymore. The only thing that works is fucking bothering, doing something. And all you have to do is engage in the debate. Talk to people who think differently to you and persuade them of your argument. It's so easy, and the left have lost the art. Stop thinking that everyone who disagrees with you is evil or racist or sexist or stupid, and talk to them. Persuade them otherwise, because if you don't, I'll tell you what you get. You get President Trump.
All right. So I'm here interviewing Matthew Calcara, and I'm pronouncing that correctly, right, Matthew? Matt?
You are, yeah.
All right. And he is a candidate for Kansas State House District number 30, correct?
Yep.
All right. So let's start off with a brief introduction of yourself and why you're running for the State House. And why do you think that you're going to be a good representative and when I believe you'll get elected?
Well, thank you. I appreciate you having me on. Yeah, my name is Matthew Calcara. I'm running because, well, when it gets right down to it, Sam Brownback caused me to run. Because he's focusing on taxes and ignoring everything else that makes Kansas prosper. And it's basically the wrong way to run the state. Everyone likes low taxes, but when the trade-off for low taxes is chronically underfunded schools and public services, then a low tax mantra just becomes a race to the bottom. So I'm running to create new opportunities to get us away from the idea that tax rates are the be-all, end-all of economic development.
Mm-hmm.
That's why I'm running.
That sounds good. How long have you been politically engaged, and how much political experience do you have?
Surprisingly, not too much. I mean, I've always voted, but it took, I think, the election of Trump to really kind of make me say, oh, you know what? Voting's not enough. I need to get out there and be doing more. So,
and I can agree with that 1,000,000%.
I think a lot of people feel that way. I definitely have talked to quite a few folks who do. So I'm one of them. Yeah.
So recently, Chris Kobach, and I did watch that the video that you sent me, which I wish I had it. I might even use it on this episode. He's made national news for his role in Trump's voter integrity commission. In what ways has he affected the voter registration policy and the process in Kansas?
So he has basically taken what was a pretty straightforward, simple process, and made it a huge hot mess. He has basically, so back in 2011, I want to say, the SAFE Act was passed. You might as well call this the Voter Suppression Act, because what it effectively did was that it required photo IDs to vote. It required birth certificates. It was the most, birth certificates in order to register to vote.
Wow.
So it's the most strict voter registration law in the country, by a long shot, quite frankly. So what happened after that was the ACLU sued to block the implementation of the law, and they have basically been 4-0 against Kobach in court because he is just as great of a lawyer as he is at encouraging people to vote.
Apparently.
but what that's done is it's knocked out parts of the law, but parts of the law still remain in effect. So you have to still bring your photo ID with you in order to vote on Election Day. But you now no longer, as of, we'll say within the last year, you no longer have to do birth certificate, show that proof of being born in the United States in order to get registered to vote. But, and here's the fun part, that's only true if you use the federal form to register to vote in Kansas. If you go on the Secretary of State's website, right, it's a two-tier voting system. It's totally separate but equal voting, and the ACLU is working on trying to get that struck down. But for now, if you use the federal form, Kobach can't touch it. You get registered, you're put on the voter rolls. But if you sign up to vote on the Secretary of State's website or use the state form or register through the DMV, then he gets his hands on your registration and can force you to show him a birth certificate. So Kansas voter registration folks are basically advising everyone in Kansas to only use the federal form and to turn that into your local election office.
Isn't that crazy when the entire state is undermining your so-called policies and whatnot?
Yeah, we've unfortunately gotten a little too used to crazy governance here in Kansas, but we're working on getting that fixed.
That was actually a question I was going to ask you. Is with this outrageous law, how is it that I presume that this isn't his first term in that position. How does he keep getting elected into it? Is it because of the voter suppression and therefore only the people that vote for him really get to go vote?
Well, I mean, that doesn't hurt him, quite frankly. Sam Brownback was reelected with a margin that was less than the number of voters that Kobach suppressed. Yeah, wow, you just did that. That's what everyone in Kansas did. It was like, whoa, wait a minute. So the Kobach is currently the Secretary of State of Kansas, and generally speaking, that has been a fairly nonpartisan office, fairly low-profile office. All the Secretary of State is supposed to do is run elections and do business registration stuff. Like when you create a new company in Kansas, you register with the Secretary of State. It's all very nonpartisan administration type of stuff. And so generally speaking, candidates for that office have not been very high profile or very well known. So when a guy who was pretty well known like Kobach ran for Secretary of State, he had a much higher profile already than any of the other candidates running, and so therefore he has been able to win that office twice. He's currently running for governor of Kansas, and that he is not quite doing so well in, because it's a much higher profile race, and we've got actual candidates who will be fighting for that office.
And I'm sure by being so aligned with Trump, I mean, even though it is Kansas, that's not going to be beneficial to him. But that's just my personal opinion.
Well, I mean, Trump is not incredibly unpopular in Kansas. He's not super popular either. But I think what's really going to hurt Kobach is not so much his association with Trump as just every single other thing he has ever done. Because he likes to go on Fox News and talk about, all the things he's doing. And it's like, Kansans are sitting here like, you should be in Kansas doing your job, buddy. The Kansas Secretary of State's website was not updated with we have a primary coming up on Tuesday, and it was not updated with this year's information, like the dates for this year, until about a week ago.
Wow, yeah, because I just had interviewed Alan Marston, and I knew that his election or primary was coming up on the 1st, on Tuesday.
Yep. And the Kansas Secretary of State's website, which is supposed to be the guiding source of all voter information in Kansas, was not updated until about a week ago when people started really complaining. So,
That is just beyond me.
Yeah, so basically I think that really ultimately is going to be what hurts Kobach more than his association with Trump. He doesn't do his job. Kansans don't appreciate someone who spends all his time talking on Fox News and not doing what he's supposed to be doing. And I feel like that's just going to continue if he gets elected governor, which I really hope he does not get elected governor.
2018 is going to be a big year, and I need some blueness somewhere across this country. So you're a Democrat precinct committee person. For the audience, can you kind of explain what that is exactly and what they do? Because I'm familiar with it myself, but I'm not too familiar with everything that they do.
Sure. So it's not a huge type of time commitment. It's a volunteer position. It's technically an elected position, at least in Kansas. I wouldn't be able to speak to every other state and whether it is, but in Kansas, you technically run for it. Most precinct committee races are uncontested because I think about 60% of precinct committee positions are currently vacant in Kansas. So what a precinct committee person does is like you're kind of the most grassroots level of the party. So if you're basically given a precinct, which is about it's usually 1,000 to 2,000 voters. And your job is to basically organize all of the Democrats in that precinct and get them to vote. And that's it. I mean, that's basically the job of the precinct committee person. So, we're only talking about in most precincts like 150, maybe 200 Democrats who are your neighbors. Precincts are very small, so they will live close to you. I mean, in some cities they can be as small as like a city block. Oh, okay. So in Kansas, there are usually a couple of blocks, but, I can walk my entire precinct from top to bottom in about 30 minutes, not even less maybe if I was walking quickly. So you basically talk to your neighbors who are Democrats and get them to turn out to vote. That's basically your job. So we'll attend a meeting, myself and the other precinct committee folks, once a month to kind of hear what's going on, what elections are coming up. Sometimes candidates will come and talk at our meeting. And then we basically go to our precincts and make sure that all of the folks who are Democrats in our precinct are out there voting. We answer any questions they might have or, talk about any candidates they might want to know about, because usually the candidates will have met us because they'll go to the precinct meeting. So it's a very grassroots position, and it's incredibly important. If you want an idea of how important it is, the difference between a precinct with and without a precinct committee person is about 50 votes.
Okay.
Now, you take 50 votes and multiply that by the number of precincts that there are in, say, the county I live in, hundreds, and you suddenly start to see, how quickly that will add up into votes. So for my race, my opponent won by about 800 votes last time. If I get a precinct committee person in each of my precincts and they do their job, that alone would provide a winning margin for my race. So
absolutely. Wow.
Yeah.
That's very interesting that they have. I think people underestimate, the smaller picture, and they always want to focus on the bigger picture. Which is why you see such a turnout for presidential elections and not so much for midterm elections or local elections and so on and so forth.
Absolutely.
With Kansas being such a deep red state, how strong is the presence of the Democrat, which they must be pretty strong considering you were saying about the Sam Brownback recent election where he almost had a near loss.
Yeah, I mean, Kansas has not always been as red as it is perceived as a state. It used to be very competitive as recently as probably the early mid-90s, and Kathleen Sebelius, a Democrat, was elected governor by a huge margin in 2006, and then before that in 2002 as well. So Democrats can win in Kansas. We had Dennis Moore, a congressman in my district up until 2010. When he retired. He actually, by the way, is the only person to have ever beaten Chris Kobach in an election. Yes, Chris Kobach ran for Congress and lost to Dennis Moore. And
we don't want you in Congress. No.
Yes, exactly. So that was yeah, but Dennis Moore remains the only person who has ever beaten Chris Kobach in an election. So it can be done. So I think what people don't realize is that in 2016, when the rest of the country was going red in some uncomfortable ways for a lot of folks, Kansas Democrats picked up 12 seats in the legislature, which is like 10% of the seats in the legislature we picked up. And that was in no small part to Sam Brownback totally failing at everything he does. And, I mean, in 2018, Kansas Democrats are pretty well positioned to win a couple congressional seats, as well as pick up even more seats in the state legislature, including, I'm hoping, fingers crossed, mine.
Right, absolutely. I'm keeping my fingers crossed for that one. Even though I won't be affected in Ohio, but still, just to know that there's somewhere else a Democrat making big moves is a good thing. So we know that Kansas, can kind of be kind of more conservative. So what issues, other than those typical conservative issues, does the LGBT community face in Kansas?
Sure. So Kansas is one of the, oh gosh, I can't remember exactly how many states this is still the case for. Something around 20, but LGBT discrimination in housing and employment is still legal.
Wow.
So you can be fired for being gay in Kansas from your job. You can be evicted for being gay in Kansas. I won't lie, that's one of the reasons I am running. I would like to get that changed. It's a sad, it's both a good and bad thing. The biggest problem I think we've had with getting something passed in that regard is actually the fact that people think that that's already a law.
Mm-hmm.
That people think, oh no, of course you can't evict someone or fire them for being gay. That's ridiculous. That can't be legal. Well, it is. It is actually legal. And furthermore, I think the most interesting part is you can actually be fired for going to a gay wedding. Not being gay yourself. You can be fired for, yes, going to a gay wedding. Your employer could say that they don't like that and that you should not be employed there anymore because you went and attended a gay wedding. Maybe straight yourself, or they can also fire you if they think you're gay. You don't, even if you're not actually gay, it's okay to fire someone if you think that they're gay.
That's sick.
So, yeah. So we've got a long way to go for LGBT rights in Kansas. But I'm hoping Kansas is also one of the 7 states that has never elected an openly gay person to the state legislature. So,
right.
Just hoping to do that too.
To mention that in your intro, that if elected, you'll be the first one, that's a big accomplishment in and of itself.
Well, yeah. I mean, it would be if I win, and I'm hopeful that I will. It's strange because I didn't know when I decided that I wanted to run that I would be the first. I just assumed that somebody else had done that before. Because there's only 7 states, like I said, that haven't yet elected someone who's openly gay to their legislature. I thought I would just be, the guy who knows a lot about transportation, that would be my profile, or like the guy who's really into voter registration. But it turns out that I'm the gay,
of course,
in a lot of ways. It's not exactly a role I was really excited about taking up, but at the same time I realize that it's important, so
it is. But I mean, I could also understand why no one really wants that to, I'm not gonna say no one, but not a lot of people would want that to be their primary role when they represent so many other reputable things or good things. They don't necessarily want that to be the only thing that they're ever known for. So,
yeah.
Understand
being
that.
a token can be not fun, but sometimes if you're gonna blaze a trail, sometimes you've got to just do it. So that's kind of where I'm at on that,
Absolutely. So as a board member of Equality Kansas, how has Kansas received you? And obviously with you being the token, and what kinds of pushback have you encountered?
Um, so so far, I have to say it's been amazing. The support that I've received from both Kansans and then folks who I call them the forever Kansans, a surprisingly large number of people who have left the state but who were born and raised here. The support from them and then the Kansans who are still here has been amazing so far. It really humbling, actually. And no one that I've talked to on the campaign trail yet has brought up the fact that I'm LGBT, other than a couple of people who have known and have reacted very positively to that. I've gotten no pushback in terms of that being a negative thing. That said, every single other openly gay candidate for the state legislature in Kansas in the past has received a death threat, at least one. So I'm not going to pretend that there's not going to be pushback, some really nasty pushback potentially, but I have faith in the people of Kansas being, pretty fair-minded. They want someone who's a good representative, and they don't really care, really. They really don't, most of the people I've talked to. They just don't care. They want a good representative, and gay is, if anything, a bonus to most people and really doesn't affect their choice, so.
Exactly, and, there's a lot bigger issues, especially in today's world, than that. And it's good to see that people are realizing that, like, hello, health insurance, hello, taxes, there's so many other bigger fish to fry than what someone is doing in the privacy of their own home or whatever, Does the Kansas LGBT community face, presumably, I'm assuming it's, not a very big presence, the community there, but do they face racial discrimination issues within itself like it does nationwide?
Well, I wouldn't presume to say that it doesn't, because I'm sure those issues are present everywhere. I will say that, so I used to live in California for a long time, in Southern California, and I was, I guess, a member in good standing of the gay community there, and I would say that because Kansas's community is much smaller, it also tends to be more supportive and less, there's a lot less infighting, a lot less,
there's more unity.
There's a lot, just less conflict within it, just because there's so much, we know what we face, and, with so many exterior threats, we're not infighting a lot, I would say. And the Equality Kansas board itself is fairly diverse for Kansas, which is, as you probably know, something around in the neighborhood of around 80% white as a state still today. So, it's nothing like majority minority California or anything like that. But we've done a pretty decent job at Equality Kansas, although I do think we could do better of making our board fairly diverse. So
okay.
I would say nobody has yet solved that problem, and Kansas is not immune from it, certainly. But for us, at least, it hasn't been as big of an issue as it might be some other places.
That's good. So your top campaign issues are education, tax policy, transportation, and obviously voting rights. Good ones. What are your plans specifically to address some of the issues that you guys have in those areas?
Sure. So education is hugely important locally. The legislature recently overturned Sam Brownback's veto and basically undid much of his experiment that he did on the people of Kansas and our budget. So that's going to make funding schools easier. It does not mean that we've solved that puzzle, and there's still ways in which the money is divvied up that we have to figure out. So I'm definitely going to try to be a part of that solution, whereas my opponent has just basically voted no way, no how on every single thing and just tried to interrupt any progress we might be making there. I'm not going to pretend that I know exactly what the right answer is on education, because I don't know exactly what we can, all agree to vote on such that we can override a veto, because that requires Democrats and moderate Republicans working together to override a veto. And we even have to get a few conservative votes in there too. So, compromise is going to be the name of the game, and I'm willing to, make some compromises in order to stand up for schools, because we just need to get it figured out. And that's what people are electing us to do. So in terms of that, I mean, I don't know what the solution is going to look like, but I do want to be part of the solution and not just a no on everything.
Don't want to be a party of opposition.
Yeah, which is funny because the Republicans have such a large majority in the legislature. Right. I do plan on doing my best to find a compromise that will work. So, yeah. In terms of transportation and tax policy and all that other stuff, ending Sam Brownback's experiment is going to be a huge bonus in terms of figuring out funding and stuff like that. One other issue that I might bring up is how terrible Brownback is at appointing people to run certain agencies. So the Kansas Department of Children and Families, which runs the foster care system, is under the leadership of a woman named Phyllis Gilmore. Mm-hmm. Phyllis is a ultra-conservative former lawmaker whose homophobia is legendary, I should say.
Yeah. I heard about her on the Rachel Maddow show. That's why you see me nodding my head like, yes.
Yeah, it would be funny if it wasn't so sad and scary. Her homophobia was basically directly responsible for the death of a child. She placed a child, instead of in a loving family with two moms, into a family that already had 14 foster children that they were taking care of. This particular child was, I don't really actually want to go into the details. They were splashed all over the newspapers in Kansas, and it's just sad. It just shouldn't happen. And what he's done, Brownback, has protected Gilmore and kept her in her job despite her failing even worse than Brownback himself has, consistently and openly. One of the candidates that we have here in Kansas for the legislature is the crusading social worker who basically brought those abuses to light and tried to basically get the legislature to do something, provide more oversight. She's fantastic, Sarah Coates, this crusading social worker. Happy to say that she is running for the legislature, and that's going to be one of her big issues. But that has been the most unheralded failure of Brownback's, is appointing terrible people to run some of these agencies that are very, very important. So getting the right governor matters, and then the legislature providing the right oversight matters. So.
Absolutely. Well, maybe after we get you in the House legislature, you can take Brownback's position afterwards. In what ways have you reached out to disenfranchised millennial and minority voters to increase engagement? Because I saw the graphs that they used in that documentary that you sent me, and it was just astounding to see that drop off between the 18 and 22-year-olds that are registered and then those that actually vote. It was just like, wow.
Yeah, I mean, Kobach is basically in the process of disenfranchising a generation of Kansans, and that's the scary part. Is the longer this law is in place, the SAFE Act, the more people will be disenfranchised, and in so many ways, it just needs to be changed as quickly as possible. But some of the things that I've been doing, I participate in what's called the Voter Registration Project. It's a nonpartisan group, and it's devoted to just basically getting people registered to vote, which in Kansas has almost become a partisan activity in many ways because of what Kobach has done to the voter registration process. It shouldn't be. Voter registration, traditionally has been something that both parties can easily support, but since voter suppression became a strategy of the GOP's, it's politicized that to a large extent. But some of the things that I'm doing in particular, we're having a National Voter Registration Day is September 26th. The weekend before that, leading up to it, we'll be having voter registration events all across the state in as many counties as we can organize them in, but for sure in all of the major cities and in a number of rural counties as well. We'll be having local events where people can go and get help registering to vote. And we'll have trained people on hand who can lead them through the process and make sure that they get registered. So I'm really excited to be a part of that. We're trying to have as many events as possible. Another thing that I'm doing is setting up a voter registration drive within our local deaf community. Okay. Because traditionally they've been really left out of the political process. In fact, I just recently became aware they don't actually teach civics in deaf schools, which is horrifying. I know. Yeah, it's horrifying to me that they don't, but it's sadly true. And so one of the things that I'm doing is in Olathe, where my district is, that we have the Kansas School for the Deaf. And so there's a large deaf community locally, many of whom are not registered to vote. So we're reaching out by providing voter registration training events so that deaf folks can learn how to register voters and then go into their own communities and register deaf voters. It's kind of the teach a man to fish idea, that we want to empower deaf people to raise up their own community. We don't want to have them rely on hearing folks to do everything for them. So that's the idea kind of behind it. So we'll be having those events. Don't believe we have that one scheduled. It'll be within the next 2 months or so. But that's one thing that I'm very much involved in, is kind of that outreach kind of effort for the voter registration project. So
awesome. That's really good stuff. Do you have any plan? Oh, I just already suggested it for you. Do you have any plans on running for a bigger office after this, or is this just your main focus for now, and then you'll think about that when the time comes?
I honestly, I am so into the race that I'm in right now that I have not even thought about that. To be really honest, I don't think I want to do it. I think the legislature, that's where many of the problems that I see, that's where they would be solved, is the Kansas legislature. And I'm running to solve problems. That's what motivates me to run. So there's no reason for me to want to move up to Congress if the issues that I care about can be best solved as, in the Kansas legislature. That's just why I'm running. So I will say this. I'm not totally without ambition. I would like to succeed my friend Brett Parker as the Speaker of the Kansas House. That'll require electing about 30 more Democrats, so we'll get to work on that.
Exactly. So, and what day is your guys' election day this coming November too, or is it a different day?
In 2017, our local elections will be, the primary is August 1st, and the general is, I wish I had looked that up, is the first Tuesday in November. Let me tell you the exact date. Looks like it will be the 7th of November in 2017.
Awesome.
Of course, my election is not until 2018, but getting started early is never a bad idea in politics.
Absolutely not. So that means I'll get to have you on multiple times to give us updates on how things are going.
Well, that'd be my pleasure.
Awesome. So why don't you go ahead and give some campaign information to the audience so that we can continue to support you in your election?
Sure. Thank you again, by the way, for having me on. You can find me on Twitter at Matt Calcara, MattCalcara. My website is matthewcalcara.com, MATTHEWCALCARA.com. Pretty simple one on that one. And Facebook, I have a campaign page as well. That's just /Matt Calcara. Yeah, anytime you're wanting to look up more information on me, my last name is pretty much the easiest way to do it. CALCARA, Matthew, my first name. So there's not a lot of people with my last name, which is nice in terms of in this age of Google. It does make it easier to find info about me. So yeah, CALCARA.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much, Matt, and I'll be in touch with you again. If you ever want to come on before I reach out, just let me know.
All right. Well, thank you so much. I really appreciate your time, Brandon, and thank you again for having me on.
No problem. Good luck to you with everything that's going on. I'll be checking in on you. Trust me.
All right. Thanks so much.
Thank you. Have a good one. Stay tuned, because after the break, I'll come to conclude. Ergo wants to be the platform for you to discuss your political thoughts. Please feel free to join the discussion via phone, video, or in person. To set up an interview, contact the Ergo Show at Outlook.com. After being publicly ridiculed, shamed, and bullied by Donald Trump, the racist relic Jefferson Beauregard Sessions III has now announced his plans to take down government leaks vis-a-vis unauthorized releases of information by government officials to the people of the news and media. His plan is to prosecute news reporters if they won't snitch on who in the government is leaking. This is a problem on many levels, but instead of focusing on the legal ramifications or the speculative insinuations of this new plan, let me tell you how important the leaks have been to this country and to the American people. Without leaks, we wouldn't have known that former National Security Advisor Mike Flynn lied about his contacts with Russian government officials, and we wouldn't know that Trump knew about the lie thanks to Sally Yates. Flynn would still be in the White House working if not for those leaks. Without leaks, we wouldn't have known that Trump obstructed justice several times by trying to get James Comey to drop the Trump-Russia investigation. Without leaks, we wouldn't know that Jared Kushner, Trump's son-in-law, tried to create secret communications with the Russian government using Russian equipment so that American intelligence agencies couldn't know what was being discussed. Without leaks, we wouldn't know that Donald Trump Jr. had a meeting with a Russian lawyer seeking political dirt on Hillary Clinton, which violated election laws. Without leaks, we wouldn't know that Donald Trump crafted his son's statement about that meeting. Without leaks, we wouldn't know that Jefferson Beauregard Sessions III himself is also compromised and that he too lied about meetings with Russian government officials and lied about the substance of those meetings. I haven't done much reporting on Special Prosecutor Robert Mueller's Trump-Russia investigation because there hasn't been anything to truly report on. What we do know is that it is making significant progress, so much so that Trump has threatened to fire Mueller if he investigates Trump's finances, because we all know he's not a billionaire. I can report today that Special Prosecutor Robert Mueller has convened a second grand jury in Washington, D.C., and despite the mainstream media dramatizing that fact and Republican spokespeople trying to water it down, a second grand jury means that Mr. Mueller is close to something and/or charges are coming. I can also report that there is bipartisan efforts in the House and in the Senate where Democrats and Republicans are surprisingly working together to make a law that will disable Trump from being able to fire Special Prosecutor Robert Mueller. So, until we have more, and until next week, this is Ergo, before you, the people.
I'm pulling my weight.